Back from wow, very recent past and into the present. Yeah, um whether this was the best time to kind of be making some sort of video like this, kind of a comeback, remains to be seen, but be doing it nonetheless. And this may actually, um let's just say some things are going to be said that is going to be probably bold, depending on how it goes. So, yeah. Um, so yes, the direct just happened, and there was specifically one announcement that kind of, pretty much, kind of further confirmed what I've kind of been saying before on Switch's placement in Nintendo Switch's placement in the grand scheme of things in all, well, Nintendo home console generations, um, platform generations, you name it. Um, and just, I guess, just kind of reality of the situation, kind of, that there's probably a lot who haven't really either delved kind of deep into it or even just kind of start talking about and even just start asking questions, really. I think when it comes down to it, and um, I guess in some cases, maybe the eShop discontinuation for Wii U and 3DS kind of starts to kind of um, um, kind of more strengthen what I was kind of more alluding to as far as kind of the whole situation, kind of, I guess. But I guess since I guess we go into the direct and all that kind of stuff. I think I've already mentioned this. I think in past podcast, specifically with, I think it used to be Music Plus Game Pass, but now it's just Game Pass. Yeah. um, yeah, just kind of explaining my stance on Nintendo and kind of all that, and it's not really about that in this video, but yeah, and I'll get to that when the appropriate time sort of comes. But I say just kind of going with the direct. Get credit credit's due, and this will just be pretty quick. It's something that really at that point just caught my eye pretty much consistently. We'll say Xenoblade Chronicles 3 looks really polished, good, confident to be released in September of this year. Looking forward to it being a good legacy sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, as they've pretty much kind of confirmed right there, and it being a crossover of 1 and 2, and I guess you kind of know me. Appreciation for those, especially for especially Token Rock Sessions Strap FE. So, yeah, if they do take the right steps, and I guess whether it just be mixing mechanics or mixing systems and all that, and mixing elements, and even birthing new elements that are result of the combinations of elements of both of the games, then that would be a sight to see. Even though Trails already kind of got into that kind of there. I guess one thing I will say is I guess this game will be the first game to kind of touch on a similar storyline that I think eventually the Trails series will get into, which is actually the time that I'll probably be most looking forward to the series. But other than that, yeah, that's that. I think from what really I think think stood out the most. There may be more, but yeah. I guess what I will say before we get to what's going to, I think already at this point, going to be, I mean, I don't know if it's calmed down, but still controversial sort of subject, kind of, but still kind of leaning more towards kind of what I've been hinting at and all that stuff. The Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC pass. I'm not going to delve deep into it because you already know, pretty sure, just everybody covering how it all is and stuff and all that. Pretty much has been hinting what I've been thinking, like the placement of this game pretty much is it's pretty much the Mario Kart for Switch, especially with them adding in like 48 tracks is mirroring what Smash Brothers Ultimate did with mostly bringing in legacy content rather than a lot of new or content as in maps and stages and characters rather than usually a lot more new characters and new stages that you expect for a new main installment of Smash. And so, and I've already kind of been alluding to this and that, that's what's been lacking. I'd say, with, I guess with the Switch generation, you can kind of say, there is no Mario Kart 9 or the actual new installment of Mario Kart. And it's mostly been ports, one-hand ports, and all that of stuff. And even the ones that are new installments, technically, aren't the new kind of main installments that you would usually expect for a new main full-fledged generation. Sorry for interruption there. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. Yeah. Back to what I was saying. Yeah. It. Yeah. Yeah. Like I've pretty much been hinting at. Yeah. Even with the new installments being new installments, they're as one would say asset flips to to their previous installments, which I guess now people are going to be probably asking, okay, what does this mean and why is this the case and all that and stuff? And yes, there's new games. Yes, there are games that can't be found on any other systems or prior systems prior systems that came out before. However, my question is going to be, well, and it's kind of just going in more in terms of reference to something kind of, at least some sort of analogy to kind of go with and all that stuff. So hopefully people kind of get where I'm going with this. Yeah. So speaking in terms of, I guess, main events and a storyline. Yeah, or events and a storyline. So there are main events or chapters. And yeah. So main events happen in, we'll say, chapter 1 and 2 in that case. And then a sequel event happens after chapter 2. But it's not really the main storyline per se, or a full-fleshed main sort of storyline that goes through from beginning to end, and is either more of a break from main sort of storyline at that particular moment, or is a bit of both, where yes, it's a bit of a break, but also continues certain storylines, character development, relationship developments, you name it. I'm getting kind of off topic with this, but to kind of make this quick, yes, continues elements, main elements from prior chapters. But with it only going, let's just say, kind of part way through, would that be considered chapter 3 in that case? Usually wouldn't. Usually it'd be something like either an intermission, Trails reference kind of right there, more in their latest installment, or an interlude. And this is where it's kind of getting, kind of where I'm kind of leading to what pretty much been thinking the system pretty much was in the first place, and now it's just made more clear, especially coming into the end of the 5th year of the Switch, 5th anniversary of the Switch. Yeah. And yeah. And so that's been the case. Sorry for an interruption. Should not be happening again, I don't think. But yeah, and so yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say really on that. And even with there being a Splatoon 3, which at that point is a situation that still is at that point just kind of a question mark, especially with no to this day, I don't think no Switch logo even at the end, hinting that it may just not be a Switch only title. And it would kind of make sense given their history. And that is what I'll leave for a future video. We guys kind of explain on the situations. This is kind of more an intro kind of to the whole thing. And even then, the leap from Splatoon 2, I don't know. I can't notice that big a difference, and I'm not noticing that big a difference graphically. And I would be open to having a conversation if it makes sense. And I'm sorry to say it like that, but yeah. I get there's more content to add and all that stuff, and okay, yeah. But it still further kind of confirms kind of what I've been hinting towards. And so when it comes down to it, yeah, that is really all I have to say on that. Say for yeah, for the most part, I think on that. And yeah, maybe we'll get to it at the end, I guess, a bit of my stance, even though I've already kind of made it clear, I think, here kind of maybe. I think just now kind of, well, actually just kind of wrapping up this Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sort of situation. I mean, it's not only expected because it's the best-selling game, but just how they place the system with how it's all come to be, and even just, yeah, I mean, the system, especially with its generation-spanning games, it just made sense. In fact, Smash Brothers Ultimate pretty much was probably the biggest hint on how this whole generation was going to go for Switch specifically. And so that's all I got to say on that. And I say the concern shouldn't be specifically on, well, why can't they kind of give us Mario Kart 9? Well, it makes sense why. Because you shouldn't be expecting it, and it likely is going to be a next-gen only system, which would make sense to, well, sell the next system, because it potentially could end up being the best seller for that system as well. And maybe this Deluxe, if it does end up getting ported over somehow, whether that be a complete edition or whatever, and I could explain more about that later in a future video, could, if that does get ported over with all the enhancements and all that stuff for the next console, that could lead up to the next installment. That is all I'm going to say. I could see that kind of be the case. I could see it if they make that announcement and ending that with a tease. That is all I'm going to say on that. But yeah, I'd say the biggest concern shouldn't really be, well, whether there will be a Mario Kart 9 per se, because, well, I'm pretty sure there would be, well, yeah. Especially with Nintendo already confirming back in September 2020, this is when they really started talking about their next gaming system, which is now referred to as their next gen device in their Q&As. So, yeah, the biggest worry is going to be whether, maybe I kind of spoke about this a bit too soon, but yeah, you'll get to, I mean, this sort of worry that I'm going to be referring to is going to probably tie in to what I'm going to go through with the eShop discontinuation. Yeah, I think. I think so. Yeah, so swiftly kind of moving, though still going to kind of tie in to what I was thinking. Yeah, eShop discontinuation, I mean, makes sense. The service has been around almost a decade. However, for Wii U and 3DS, however, it still makes it pretty telling and pretty clear. As I was kind of hinting at, the cracks are starting to show. Like, okay, all right, it shut down as kind of expected and all that stuff. Now the real question is going to come in is how, in what way will there be to access those legacy sort of titles on a new or newer systems, aside from what they, well, I mean, especially for those that are the games that are specifically designed for that dual screen sort of gameplay. And it just gets kind of to that point where, yeah, they have not provided, I'd say, sufficient means of getting around that, really. I'd say the sufficient means would have been, if they were going to do dual screen gameplay, just add in a silence and add a touchpad and just be done with it. But they didn't do that. So I don't think that's the case. And I think, and I am going to kind of make a video on what could actually end up being their next system if it's only one. It kind of ties in. I'll just give a hint. The Joy-Con grip, specifically in the middle, is a hint as to what they could end up doing as far as how to kind of get around that. And this wouldn't be for the Switch. This would be for likely the next system. Yeah. But yeah, I'd say just kind of getting back into eShop, getting discontinued and all that stuff. We're kind of wrapping up. I mean, bit of a PPS expected, but no, I guess, enough of a solution has been provided yet to preserve that the sort of gameplay style, especially dual screen gameplay style that are in the games specifically for those systems. Yeah, and unless they port them, which I doubt they're going to be able to port all of them, the likely case is that it's either going to be emulated for a future system or new system, or it's going to be streamed like they've been doing with the Switch Online. And either way, it all points to the fact that you're going to have dual screen gameplay, or you're going to have to provide a sufficient alternative to that, which if you're going to be using that touchscreen a lot, then they're going to have to provide a stylus, I would think, which they haven't, I don't think. Yeah. And I would think a touchpad to kind of just at least, well, help things out, especially for home gameplay. Yeah. And that's all I'm going to say. Of course, they got to March 2023. There could be announcements coming in this year and all that stuff. As far as all that is, yeah. Especially with all that is concerned, I'd say, yeah. And that's all I really have to say on the matter. On it, quite the kind of messy situation kind of in. Then again, they've kind of been in a messy situation kind of at this point for a while. And yeah, I mean, and I guess as far as like the possible complaints and all that stuff, I mean, I guess one of them would be, well, I mean, we're going to keep the titles. Yeah. I'd say the pretty, well, one considerable sort of worry would be I mean, I already kind of mentioned this already, but like, yeah, just how are these titles going to be playable, we'll say, on future systems? Yeah, which I already kind of mentioned. I'm not going to go back into that whole thing. And I guess another thing would be what does just more just kind of bring into why it's important to have a direct successor. Because when this sort of thing happens, yeah, there's usually successors to at least help, at least to kind of look to and be like, okay, I should be going there, or getting that system to continue that sort of style of gameplay preserved. And they usually do that. Switch is the first system where they just don't really, and they kind of end up kind of sacrificing kind of, at least up to this point, yeah, for the most part. And so, and hence kind of reason they've been really vague about, I mean, they said initially before the Switch name was revealed that this wasn't a successor to Wii U and 3DS. They could lie and all that stuff. That's another thing, but they haven't even really updated ever since on this whole sort of situation, really, on the placement of this system as a whole. And this whole eShop situation is kind of showing that in and of itself. And so, yeah. And so I guess that's all I have to say on that whole matter. I guess on worry, back to the Mario Kart sort of situation. It's more just to kind of do with the bigger situation at large, specifically with their next system sort of lineup. Is I'd say the biggest thing I would worry about is whether they're going to have a compelling lineup, which would have to have next gen only games, because if it's all cross gen, at least the ones that many would be looking to, um, as far as system sellers and all that, yeah. That almost kind of repeat the Wii U situation on the whole idea of perception on it just being an extension of the Wii. And so that should be the concern, I'd say, right there. On that, and whether there will be enough games that show whatever their next gen device is, and all that stuff. And they've already started talking about this in 2020. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say right there. That right there should, I think, be one of the biggest sort of concerns coming out of this, is are how are they going to preserve the next gen sort of experience, especially next gen only sort of experience? I guess you could say, kind of. That's all saying the matter. And I guess just coming at the end, I guess my stance on maybe kind of Nintendo, and I guess including the Switch. Yeah, Nintendo still keep tabs. I still look forward to see what they're doing, especially Microsoft, especially with Zuma Conquest 3 and all that stuff. Sometime later and all that stuff. And even Breath of the Wild sequel and Bayonetta 3. I mean, you already kind of heard my thoughts on the podcast. Not really too pleased with how that went. Yeah, especially with Microsoft's, I say, new IP that probably is going to have the longest development time potentially, because they started, I think, recruitment of it for that new IP back in, I think August 2017. I think it is likely not coming out this year. So yeah, and they also have a Zelda game in recruitment. I don't think it's the Breath of the Wild sequel, because if it was, it would have been taken out. I mean, then again, I don't know. There could be a late confirmation sort of thing. Like, let's just say there's a name reveal for the Breath of the Wild sequel, and then that gets taken out. Okay, there's your answer. But other than that, so just looking at that, looking at their recent yearly R&D expenses being at the highest peak numbers, and I say during Switch generation, the R&D expenses, yearly expenses have been going up year by year, and it's looking to be that way once it comes to March. Well, we'll get, yeah, I mean, the the documentation involved with those, with the expenses up to end of March, will be available, I think, either late April or early May. Yeah. But the forecast looks like it's still hitting at the highest that they've spent there. And what they announced in November, with them increasing major increases in their expenses on development and operations and all that. I would think, even though they may have been making some probably questionable sort of decisions maybe recently, I would think, just given all this time and all that of stuff, and the fact that I've also kind of hinted that they may have kind of been stalling probably for this moment, especially with the delays, which are still going on. They haven't stopped with all that. And I'm not talking just during COVID. I'm talking even before then, back in specifically, I think 2018 and 2019, I think. Yeah. um, yeah. Um, yeah, that is all I'm gonna say, I think, on that. And um yeah, and so you could say I'm still optimistic to seeing what they could do next. Even though it may not sound like it really. I mean, I guess at worst more cautious than anything. But and then I guess as far as like my stance on Switch, yes, I don't view it really as a successor to Wii U or 3DS. Um, especially with what I said. And not really going to get it, especially just seeing how things have kind of been going and how things have pretty much been at that point. And I think you just make it clear. Um, if it's going in a direction that I think it's kind of going in and how they place the system, I am not going to be double dipping my way through just to get an actual new installment of Mario Kart, Xenoblade X, 2, or any long anticipated sequels, which at this point is going to be about a decade long, when that should just be expected for, well, one main system. So, and direct, true next system. That is all I'm going to say. And yeah, I don't know what to say at this point. That is all I'm going to say on the whole thing. And as I do say, I mean, well, actually, first, everyone's safe, especially in the middle of the pandemic again. And yeah, that is all I'm going to say on the whole thing. And I really do hope there's some who understand kind of where I'm coming from. If not, I am open to a conversation, a fair-minded, at least, sort of conversation, I think, in this regard. But I say, other than that, sorry about that. Definitely going to be last time, I'd say right there. Yeah. I say just other than that, yeah, that's all I gotta say. And yeah, and really what I'm gonna say is not really gonna be mattering really necessarily to the people who didn't get a Wii U specifically. Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say on that sort of matter. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say anything on that. And I mean, yeah, just enjoy your games wherever they are, and that's all I gotta say. But at least um at least attempt to understand where maybe some who are coming from with that sort of situation, kind of, I guess you could kind of say. And as I do almost always say, see me in the future.